Welcome to Talking Heads. This week we find out why an Academy Award-winning Hollywood producer is planning to film the story of an Australian surgeon. Craig Jurisevic thought of himself as an ethical man, but when he saw the war in Kosovo on television a decade ago and decided that as a doctor he could help, the trouble really started. Craig, welcome to Talking Heads.
Thank you for having me.
How did you get involved in a very complex war on the other side of the world?
Well, with a moderate amount of thought and a lot of impulse, I decided after seeing the hordes of refugees fleeing across the border from Kosovo to Albania on our televisions one night in early '99 that something had to be done, that I could help in some way, and put my hand up to volunteer with an American group that was sending a team across.
And when you got there, it was more complicated than that because you put down the scalpel and you took up a gun.
That's right. That was the unfortunate but inevitable consequence of this kind of war, where I was forced in order to help the victims of war, I had to use my skills both as a surgeon and my past skills and training with firearms in the military to help the victims at the front line, to protect the victims and myself.
Now, in a conventional war, and this wasn't one,
No.
Surgeons don't do that, do they?
No, not at all. In a conventional war, even in a conventional military force, though we carry arms, it's very rare that a surgeon will have to use them. But this was by no means any conventional war.
Why was this so different?
It was actually at the end of a series of wars in the Balkans, as we all know, the war in Slovenia, Croatia, then the horrific Bosnian War, both regular Yugoslav army forces and the paramilitaries, the vicious paramilitaries, were in a last-ditch effort to gain control of an area by pushing out civilians in Kosovo. Had no respect for the Geneva Conventions and no respect for human rights whatsoever, so it was not a conventional war.
Donna, your wife's a specialist too, specialist medico.
Yes.
Did she understand, say, well, darling, great?
Well, she understood. She understood exactly my reasons for wanting to go. She, being a doctor herself, we'd just been married 4 months, so it was. She obviously wasn't very happy that I was up and leaving 4 months after we were married to go to a war zone. And then there was also the concern of leaving my 5-year-old son behind. And it was probably because I had a child that I realised that I had to go. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, and what that involves is basically all operations involving everything bar the heart. And I enjoy it mainly because of the patients and also because of the team approach we use to treat patients with lung cancer in particular. And by being able to, in many cases, cure the lung cancer, it gives you a great sense of reward and worth. I always did want to become a doctor, even at an early age. As early as I can remember, I wanted to be working as a doctor in a third world country. But I always wanted to help those less fortunate than me. Well, I was born in 1965, one of twins, my brother Stuart. We were born in Adelaide. 5 years later, Mum had another set of twins, my sisters. So that was a fairly heavy workload for Mum, considering she was also working as a psychiatric nurse at the time, and Dad working night shifts as a proofreader at the Advertiser. Well, growing up in Campbelltown in the early 70s, we were surrounded fairly much by vast expanses of market gardens. Lots of market gardens run by mainly Italian immigrants. So it's a very multicultural part of Adelaide. Well, my father met my mum in 1959 when Mum arrived in Australia as a refugee from Yugoslavia. Many Yugoslavs fled Yugoslavia into Italy and lived in refugee camps, and as she spoke fluent Italian, she worked as an interpreter for the Italian government on behalf of the Yugoslav refugees. Well, my decision to go into medicine was basically driven by the will to help others, and that came to me through several generations of my family, through stories from my grandfather, who was taken prisoner during the Second World War, went to the concentration camps, came back to Yugoslavia, was imprisoned there for speaking out against the corrupt government, but who was always willing to help others. The bottom line is it does give you a good feeling to help others, and medicine was just a natural progression from that.
That grandfather of yours, Frank,
Yes.
the maternal grandfather, had a war story really of his own, which had a big impact on you.
The fact that he could go through what he went through and still maintain his moral compass and the goodness within himself not to be bigoted against any group was amazing. I don't think I'll ever reach that, but it was a particularly big goal to aspire to.
When you did study medicine, why didn't you stay satisfied with the idea of being a GP, looking after people's aches and pains?
There is a huge amount of gratification in being able to heal people. And with the path I've chosen as a surgeon, and particularly trauma surgery, I've sort of limited myself to how I can help people, and that is usually people with traumatic injuries, which then draws you to war zones.
The first experience you had was with the Palestinian Intifada
Yes.
in the early 90s. And that's also where you were trained in combat skills by
Yes.
the Israeli army.
I went to Israel, again looking for experience in trauma surgery. And in most of these hospitals, you have military units attached to the hospitals where they send people with major injuries. And during the course of the year, I eventually volunteered on one occasion to go on a retrieval mission with an Israeli military troop to pick up injured Israelis and Palestinians. And then I put my hand up thereafter 2 or 3 times a week. And most of the combat training was really training on the job. You're taught by the people around you how not to get shot and how to protect your patients. Not the way I would have chosen to do it initially, but it was an invaluable experience. 1999, I was towards the end of my training as a cardiothoracic surgical specialist. All of us were confronted by the images of the mass exodus of ethnic Albanian refugees fleeing the onslaught of the Serb military.
The situation is not safe at all in Kosovo.
Watching the images of the tens of thousands of refugees fleeing across the border just reminded me and many others instantly of the exodus from all the European countries in the Second World War and, of course, the Holocaust. Being a father at the time myself, I thought if I were a father or a mother in Kosovo, fleeing paramilitary forces with injured and dead children, I'd thank God for that somebody would come and help me. And that action was to provide my services as a trauma surgeon with experience in similar areas to the refugees. There were several avenues for me to take, and the easiest one at the time, and the one that was most readily accessible to me, was a group called the International Medical Corps. From memory, within 10 days, everything was green lighted, and I was off with the International Medical Corps to provide services in the camps in northeastern Albania. 2 other surgical units in the refugee camps, which were first and second world surgical units. They were fantastic. But we were denied the opportunity to treat the patients in those units because the local health official was running a business. And I saw the injustice in the hospitals. For example, refugees who presented to the local hospital in Kukes with gunshot wounds and blast injuries being thrown out because they couldn't pay the 200 Deutschmarks. I tried to bite my tongue for a little while, but you can't really. Not as a medical person whose whole focus is treating the sick and easing suffering. You can't pass a blind eye to that. Eventually, I decided to take stronger action, and through a friend and reporter, John Anderson, who worked for the US military paper, the Stars and Stripes, I exposed the full extent of the corruption in the Albanian hospital at Kukes. I became a marked man by the local mafia, the local organised criminals. So it was made very clear to me through contacts I had that my life was in danger.
Just explain what was happening in that hospital.
Well, in a nutshell, the hospital was run by Dr. Senna, the hospital director, who was in league with the local organised criminals. Refugees, they were being denied treatment in the emergency room if they didn't have 200 Deutschmarks.
Some of these people some of these patients you'd actually treated.
Yes, we've treated them at the border in our mobile surgical unit and sent them on to the Kukes hospital. And some died. Many were physically removed, and there were rumours around that some were actually killed when they refused to leave.
Of course, there's this huge international focus on just this place at that time.
Absolutely.
This was the heat of that war. And the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan visited. What happened?
We chose a typical case of this corruption, a young girl who had been injured, gave birth in the forest before she fled across the border to Albania, was brought into the Kukes hospital and denied treatment. She was left to die. We took her from the Kukes hospital covertly to the Italian camp, operated on her, and she made a full recovery. And we presented this girl in person with her newborn child to Kofi Annan and his entourage. I explained the story to him in a little more detail than I explained to you just then. He looked at her, looked up at me and said, "This is a terrible tragedy," and the entourage moved on. And that was the extent of involvement of the UN in this corruption scandal.
Was that enough to trigger you to join the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army?
It was.
That
That
incident?
The defining moment was the fact that the international community, as far as the UN, were not interested. So that's how I ended up getting John Anderson from the Stars and Stripes newspaper involved and leaking the story. It made it all the way to the top of NATO command, who then forced the Albanian government to allow us to use the surgical units in the camps. At that point in time, I was very hopeful, but at that point in time, the Serb forces shut the border. So all the work and exposure that I brought forth was wasted. So it was at that point that I decided to join the KLA and treat victims of war at the front line. So once I decided to move up to the front line, in the back of my mind I realised that as part of providing this care, I'd have to carry arms to defend myself and to defend my patients and those looking after my patients.
How you doing, Greg?
The front line was a terrible place. It was situated just over the border from Albania, within Kosovo. The days were quite warm, up to 35 degrees, and the nights cooled down to temperatures just above zero.
Come up here.
There's only one. I'm the only surgeon in the entire front.
Only foreign surgeon.
I set up a surgical unit in a small cave that had been used by shepherds previously. This cave was only situated 300 or so metres from the forwardmost Serbian positions. The cave itself measured only 7 or 8 metres by 4 metres across, and I had to do all the operating at the mouth of the cave to make the most of sunlight. Because of the risk from snipers and mortar crews, we had to keep the dead in the cave, often for days at a time. So we had to sleep with the dead. In this war and in most wars, doctors on the front line have to act as combatants and carry arms to protect themselves and their patients. You just don't have a choice. Well, you do have a choice, but if you don't do that, you won't survive long, and your patients won't have the benefit of you being there to help them. After nearly 2 weeks of constant shelling during the daylight hours and ineffectual NATO bombing during the night, I reached the conclusion that something had to be done to stop this. So I decided to take it upon myself to get the correct coordinates of Serb military installations and have those conveyed back to US Special Forces. So I took a patrol myself, just 3 of us, and carefully went down behind Serb lines and carefully mapped the coordinates on a map. I've since learned that the coordinates I provided may well have resulted in the effective bombing of Serb forces along the Pastric front.
Joining the KLA is something altogether different from joining the Australian Army.
Yes.
They became allies of NATO, but just prior to that had been regarded as a terrorist group.
The KLA were by no means virtuous and angels. There were criminals and killers amongst the KLA. But where I found myself at that point in time, at that location, the majority of the KLA were refugees. Many were also Kosovar or Albanian expatriates from Germany, the United States, who volunteered to come back and fight.
Restaurant workers from New York?
That's right. Pizza bar owners.
Totally ragtag outfit.
They were. Ragtag is a very good way to describe them.
And you, because of your training in Israel, actually knew more about... You started to train these people.
I did. One of the ethical issues was how could I, as a medico, train people in the use of firearms and tactics of combat.
You called it preventative medicine,
yes,
which is some would regard as a horrifying twist of what preventative medicine is supposed to mean.
It is. It was a way of justifying things to myself at the time. It was not exactly medicine. It was a form of prevention of harm through education. They would not have stood a chance against the hardened Serb regular and paramilitary forces who had been fighting for 8 years and who were brutal and efficient.
You took on the role, as you explained there, to create the coordinates for the Serb positions.
Yes.
With you knowing that that would lead potentially to bombing raids of those positions.
With me knowing and hoping it would, so we would end the carnage at the front line.
Is that the role of a doctor?
No, that's not it. That role was the role of somebody who was looking after the people around him, looking after the men and women I was working and fighting with. The role of a person wanting to see the suffering come to an end. It was a very one-sided conflict. The KLA were at the front line, told to sit there, not to fire at the Serbs so as not to aggravate them, and we were being shelled constantly all day long, and it had to end.
Was there part of your head saying, I shouldn't be doing this?
Not at that point in time, no. I honestly would have almost done anything to stop the shelling.
You led various patrols to retrieve wounded people.
Yes.
On one occasion, you found in a booby-trapped house a woman who'd been severely injured, wounded, yes. Provocatively so it seems, in order to entice you in there.
Yes. We came across a patrol. Our patrol came across a small village, not even a village, 4 or 5 houses. We sent 3 men to the front. They walked in through the front door, set off a booby trap. The 2 men were killed and the lady inside was killed as well. There was a woman crying from the house that I was just about to enter. Having seen what happened to the other men, we found a fragmentation grenade booby trap at the doorstep. We disarmed that fairly simply. In a gas-lit lamp room, we found there was a woman still alive. She had a dead child in her arms on her lap. She had seen her family killed, and she looked at us and looked at me and asked us to end her life. There was no way she was going to survive. She was going to live for another few hours. And
one of the soldiers you were with said, I can't do this.
No. So she asked me. And she also asked me to bury her child, her son, who was 4 or 5, before the next sunset, as is in accordance with the Muslim faith. And I did end her life. As far as I could see at that point in time, regardless of my belief as it goes, as it pertains to euthanasia, I had no choice. If I left her there alive, she would have suffered more.
And you carried out the wishes, her last wish, which was to bury her son.
Yes.
And you say you've never felt such pain as you did that.
It was difficult. Having a boy of my own at that time who was about the same age, it was very difficult. But we did it. We buried him halfway up the mountain, looking back down over the valley. We couldn't bury him with a tombstone. We had nothing, and that was one thing that still haunts me, that we had to bury him in an unmarked grave away from his home. It was difficult coming back to normal life in Adelaide. The stress you experience in a war zone is predominantly psychological, but there are also the physical stresses. When I came back to Australia, I was 10 or 12 kilos lighter than I was when I left. I had very little sleep in the weeks beforehand. I was starving. Emotionally, I was very drained, but I had to get straight back into my normal life. At that stage, I was at the final year of my training as a cardiothoracic surgeon. I had an exam to study for. So I had to study for the exam, I had to work, I had family concerns as well, so I buried myself in work and study, and that was actually very helpful in coping initially. And then, to make things a little more difficult, I was embroiled in a legal battle with some former colleagues who were trying to prevent me from entering the workforce as a cardiac surgeon.
John Knight from Flinders Medical Centre and Ian Ross admitted telling hospitals in 2001 that a new heart surgeon, Craig Jurisevic, wasn't qualified and shouldn't be hired, even though they had helped to train him.
So we had this other ongoing battle which lasted almost 4.5 years, which was very stressful for my family, particularly my wife. And it did act, though, to keep me preoccupied.
Knight and Ross were penalised $55,000 each.
So effectively, by blocking me early in my career, I've been blocked from performing cardiac surgery, particularly in private, for the rest of my career.
The healthcare of patients was not the primary motive. This was all about protecting certain territory from being crossed over.
And once that had all settled, then I realised that I was having issues with what could be now considered as post-traumatic stress disorder. Even though I coped very well with it and my work didn't suffer, I continued my research work and kept working away like a busy bee. My relationships at home did suffer. Sleep was difficult, and I would be quite short-tempered and very difficult to live with. So it did come to the fore many years later.
Doctor, what about treating yourself when it came to post-traumatic stress? Because these issues did arise.
Yes. The first I became aware of it was in late 2005 when I was organising or preparing a talk on Kosovo. And I came across an article discussing the number of casualties as a result of the bombing, on which I gave coordinates. And that's when a lot of the memories became more vivid, my sleep became more disturbed. But I just soldiered on, if you pardon the pun, and continued working. But it was quite pervasive.
Well, you did a peculiar thing, and that was join the Australian Defence Forces, the Army Medical Corps.
Yes.
As a surgeon?
As a surgeon.
Which then took you to East Timor and later Afghanistan.
Yes.
That seems like the anti-therapy to me.
Well, you would think so, but as it was an ill-defined, it was sort of an ill-timed act of patriotism, or an attempt to try and wrestle with the demons of the past by helping more war victims, that led me to join the Army. I was educated virtually for free, trained in medicine virtually for free, and it was, I thought it was a time to give something back. It was very helpful for me to go through the story in a very objective way and to put pen to paper, as it were, or finger to keyboard, and actually go through the entire conflict in almost a diary, a memoir form, almost from day to day. A lot of the memories that were consciously suppressed, I brought up again. I had to develop techniques to deal with the issues that arose. So it was very cathartic, it was very helpful. It was also very helpful to describe the events and feel as though I was contributing to a historical document, describing what happened in the war from my point of view, from where I sat during the war. It wasn't just an exercise in psychology and self-help, it was actually just as much, if not more, an exercise in documenting the war as accurately as possible for future generations, because as the more time that passes after a conflict, the more the stories change, the more political influences come in to change fact. So I thought it was actually almost my duty to document what had happened accurately.
And the Oscar goes to...
Several Hollywood producers and directors, as well as Australian producers and directors, have shown interest in converting the book into a film. And it's come as quite a surprise. But depending on who picks it up and when, we could have a film within the next few years. I'll just wait and see.
What do you think Hollywood might make of your story?
Who knows? I hope it'll make a film about the suffering of the innocent victims of war. I see myself in a film more as a vehicle to describe what happened over there to the Kosovo Albanian refugees, to the fighters at the front line. So I hope it's a war story with an anti-war theme that focuses on the victims and not just on me.
Back home, you're involved in another fight, a fight which would certainly seem a radical idea to many, and that is to ban cigarette smoking.
Yes.
Not to urge people to stop smoking, and you do this as a lung surgeon.
Yes. After all I've been through, the wars, the conflicts, seeing how how many people die for pointless reasons, and to come back to Australia and to see that we're allowing 20,000 Australians to die every year from smoking-related disease and doing nothing about it, it is gut-wrenching and infuriating. If we had no cigarettes, we would half our hospital beds, we would make Australia a much healthier place. So my aim is to ban the sale of cigarettes, which I personally think is criminal.
Craig, you've seen far more than I ever want to see, and yet you seem to be an optimist.
True. I am still an optimist after all this. Seeing the good in people does keep you going, and I think people can do good. People can do bad things, but it's the little sparks of hope that keep you going.
Thanks for coming on Talking Heads.
You're welcome. Thank you.